This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
Well, oh well, we have a lot to talk about on this podcast today. Let's get right to it. Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles. We welcome Bedard back with his Rutgers shirt on. He caught the victory. I'm glad he did not run onto the floor and get arrested. That was good to see. Congratulations on that, sir. Let's get to the football. Let's start with J.C. Jackson. Everybody's talking about it. The decision, the Patriots have let J.C. walk into free agency. Do you like it, love it, or hate it, Greg?
Well, Nick, I understand the different dynamics here, and I understand. Do I think J.C. Jackson is worth $17.3 million a year for one season? No, probably not. But I think, and who knows, we'll have to see how this turns out. Belichick could be right. He could think that there's a soft market that that the rest of the league doesn't view J.C. Jackson's value there as well. I think he's being mistaken if he thinks that after being in Indianapolis for the scouting combine and talking to people. And like we talked about last week, Nick, it only takes one team.
Right.
And one team could get really jittery and say, we don't have any cornerbacks. And all of a sudden, one agent literally said to my face, he's going to get $25 million a year. And I just about spit out my drink in his face. But that's the kind of chatter that we were hearing in Indy. I think that in my mind, it would shock me if he doesn't get more than the franchise tag. So we're talking $18-19 million a year at least. If he doesn't, and if I was a betting man, I would say he passes Jalen Ramsey on at $20 million a year. And when you consider that, when you consider what the Patriots have at the position, how they left themselves because of poor drafting and things like that, without a whole lot of options, I hate the J.C. Jackson decisions. I think that the best thing for the Patriots would be for J.C. Jackson to play on the tag at $17.3 million. You just 2 years ago, you tagged Joe Thuney, a guard, and gave him $15 million for a year. How is a guy who turns the ball over and is your only real good man cover guy on the outside, how is he not worth less than $3 million more? I mean, to me, this is another franchise tag mistake by Bill Belichick. He's not planning ahead anymore. He gets caught behind. We talked about it at the time when they traded Stephon Gilmore. Now J.C. Jackson has all the leverage. They're screwed. They're going to have to franchise tag him. And maybe Belichick is throwing a tantrum and says, I don't want to be beholden to any player, but I'm sorry, you put yourself here for a variety of reasons. And so for me, if I was Belichick, I would have cleared the cap space. I would have tagged him, knowing that there's interest out there for Jackson. If he's going to get upwards of $20 million a year, if not more, there's a market out there for him. You have a commodity. And to me, the risk of getting something good in a trade was worth the $17.3 million risk. At the worst, I tag J.C. Jackson. I have a carrot in front of him that he has to play good again. He can't tank. He already said he would play for the franchise tag. At the worst, you bring him back. You're better on defense because of that for a year. Then it gives you a year to see, hey, what is Sean Wade, who you traded for last year? What can he do? What are we getting in the draft? Maybe you get something good in the draft, but maybe you trade him when you think, all right, we're okay. We trade him at some point in time. If not immediately, have a tag and trade thing in place. That, to me, that would have been the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario would have been him on the team. Best case would have been a trade, and which gave you cap space back and probably gave you a decent draft pick this year, which you could use. And so to me, to let him just walk, look, the Patriots can't sign a premium free agent now. If they do, it cancels it out. You get nothing for J.C. Jackson in 2023. So to me, I thought it was a complete miscalculation, and I think they blew it again, just like they blew it on the Tooney tag.
It doesn't make much sense to me. I agree with pretty much everything that you said. I don't know why it happened. I don't know if it's, Belichick got caught kind of unprepared and all that. I just, the biggest issue to me is with the Belichick side of it. It's tough for me to line this up with everything that we've known about Bill over the past 20 plus years. In the last few years, of course, it seems like he's kind of let his foot off the pedal in some instances. Then last offseason, he was all over it. He was ahead on things. He was signing guys. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, maybe Bill was just not ready. And he has his reasons. What I will say is I disagree with the move. And the biggest issue football-wise is we have no idea what they're going to do. Like, if you told me you're letting Jackson walk because you had this young stud outside corner ready and available to you, okay, I get it. If you're going to draft a guy, you better hit on that guy immediately where he can walk out onto the field and make plays and be as good as, J.C. Jackson has been, or at least near that level. Because right now, your secondary, you got Jalen Mills, folks, as your number one corner, which is terrifying. So they've got to do something. I don't know what the plan is going to be. I'm going to guess Belichick has a plan. I don't think he's just going through this blindfolded. But you better have some kind of action following up if you lose Jackson to help this secondary, because right now the secondary was thin with Jackson. It is a real issue without him. Let's move on to some of the big NFL stuff. We still have to get to Kyle Van Noy and everything, but, we've got to jump to the next big story, and that, of course, is Russell Wilson being traded to Denver. Greg, your reaction to this deal, and how does it affect the Patriots if it affects the Patriots?
Yeah, I was a bit surprised that the Seahawks ended up moving Russ. I mean, I knew he wanted to move, but that they ultimately did it, I was a bit surprised. And it's a big risk by, Pete Carroll, who's not getting any younger, and John Schneider, the GM out there. Not too long ago, they were in this sort of vast QB, almost desert land where, they had to sign Matt Flynn for big money and drafted some chump named Russell Wilson in the 4th round. And that was sort of where they were. And then all of a sudden they struck gold, similar to the Patriots with Tom Brady, struck gold on Wilson, and they were living the high life. And now they're going backwards. I do think I wouldn't rule the Seahawks out on anything as far as QBs moving and things like that, like a Deshaun Watson, a Derek Carr, who, despite all the good things that Josh McDaniels and company are saying about Carr out in Vegas, they're always going to listen. They're always going to listen. They might have designs on, something else at some point if something were to develop. The other quarterbacks that are available out there, I think the Seahawks will be in. As far as how it affects the Patriots, number one, let me just dismiss a couple things that I've heard in the last day. Of course, Patriots fans have to make it about them. So they talk about how Josh McDaniels will be back at offensive coordinator in 2023 or whatever, because now the division's stacked, and it is. But look, and this is the way I felt when he went out there in the first place. I mean, yeah, they added Russell Wilson. I mean, he's really good, but they were still pretty good out there with Mahomes and Herbert. Look, the head coaches, look more at the head coaches. Like, you can't just look at the quarterback, Felger. Look at the coaches. Brandon Staley has proven he's pretty much an idiot so far, even though he's really smart and gives great press conferences. As far as an actual coach, he blew games for his teams last year. Actually blew them.
Yep.
So that's one. Number two, you have Andy Reid, who's winding down, not exactly a Mensa candidate either with in-game coaching. Who knows who his successor is going to be? Matt Nagy? Eric Bieniemy? That's coming very soon, probably in the next year or two. And who's the other one?
Nathaniel Hackett. Denver.
Oh, yeah. Nathaniel Hackett in Denver, who we know nothing about. Okay, so, yeah, those guys have better quarterbacks right now. That doesn't mean Bupkis. Dan Marino didn't do much. Yeah, they were a threat every year in the division. Dan Marino went to one Super Bowl, okay, or in his second year in the league. I'm pretty sure that could be the case for, I like Mahomes' chances, but Herbert, who I think reminds me a lot of Dan Marino, and, and Russell Wilson, it's been a while since he's been there. I mean, he hasn't exactly elevated the Seahawks to new heights in the past 4 or 5 years. So I don't think it's a death sentence for Josh McDaniels or anything like that. Number 2, as far as how it affects the Patriots, popular thing on Sports Talk Radio yesterday, my boys Felger and Maz, I'm sure Jay Stu is going to clip this, was now you're behind. Now, you had to go for it. You should have gotten Russell Wilson. You should have done this. You should have done that. I just think it's absurd. I mean, these guys, all they care about is the quarterbacks. And yes, the quarterbacks are nice, and they certainly help you get to a certain level without much around them. But those are only the very special ones. They talk like it's a Mahomes, Brady. There's really not many out there besides that. As far as those guys who, if you just have the quarterback, then you can punch your ticket elsewhere. Other than that, everybody is swimming in a, pretty deep pool as far as what quarterbacks can do for you. And I think that, look, is Russell Wilson better than Mac Jones? Yeah. Is Justin Herbert better than Mac Jones? Yeah. But the combination of everything, building a team, being disciplined, having good coaches and all that, and having a quarterback on a rookie deal, I'm sorry, the Patriots haven't fallen behind. They're in a group. I don't think the Denver Broncos are all of a sudden catapulted into the Final Four of the AFC. Not by a long shot. Not when they have a brand new head coach where we don't know if he could do jack at that position. So I think it's just absurd to be talking about the Patriots that they've fallen behind or whatever because they didn't go get Russell Wilson. Mac Jones is good enough. The problem with their team is the rest of the roster that they need to build up. They've been here for years. We knew that, and they need to get out of that.
I think it's a tougher road for the Patriots. There's no doubt about that. Russell Wilson makes Denver a tougher team. I don't know if he makes them a top 3 team in the conference. I don't think they're there yet. I do think they could get there as a contender depending on what they do the rest of free agency and in the draft. They still have a number of picks in the top 115, I think it is. And they do have a pretty good defense, and they have a lot of skill position guys around Wilson, especially a young receiving core that I think is pretty good if they get their act together. And I think the quarterback has held them back over the past couple of years with Drew Lock. So I do think it makes it a tougher road for the Patriots. I think adding to this offense for New England, finding that number 1 receiver would be very, very nice. And, I believe in Mac. It's just what are you going to give Mac to utilize in the pass game that will help him take another step. And I think that's adding a legitimate number 1 receiver. I said it last year before the season. I'll say it again this year, whether that's, Amari Cooper or somebody else, I don't know, but try to find that one guy. And as far as Seattle, I've heard a couple of things out here in California. I had Doug Kite on my show yesterday, and Doug kind of threw the name out there of Kirk Cousins, which I found to be very interesting. Shane Waldron, of course, has a history with Cousins in Washington, and Waldron is the play caller for Seattle. So a Kirk Cousins was thrown out there. And then I heard this morning Mike Salk on the morning show of my station bring up what you just brought up, Deshaun Watson. So I don't know if we really know where Seattle's going just yet. Let's not forget that Carroll's calling the shots. It's not Schneider. Carroll has a grasp on that organization. Paul Allen passed away. The ownership is kind of absent. So it's really Carroll running the show, and he's 70 years old, folks. So I don't know if he's going to sit through a full rebuild. We know Bobby Wagner was released yesterday, but I'm not sure he's going to sit there and just kind of rebuild this thing and say 3 years from now when I'm 73, 74, we'll be in a spot to contend. I don't think that's the plan. Rodgers stays in Green Bay. Greg, thoughts?
I was surprised by this. I thought that, Mr. Needy would at the end of the day would say.
By the way, let me just jump in for a second. Did you notice everybody was like, oh, how's he going to handle Russell Wilson upstaging him? And then he had to send out the tweet saying, wait a minute. I'm returning to the Packers, but I haven't yet signed the contract. It's like he couldn't help himself.
More fake news, more misinformation. Everybody's dumb. Yeah, he always has to make it about himself. I mean, God, I love the guy, but holy mackerel. I was a bit surprised because I thought that he would look at what Brady did and sort of see the benefit of a change. I think he could. I think everybody could have used a change in this situation. I mean, yeah, they've been successful and they get to the NFC Championship game and lose. But I was surprised because he's the guy who thinks that nothing is ever his fault. And so I figured he'd use the opportunity to say, I only got one Super Bowl, one Super Bowl title. That was because of them, Ted Thompson, Gutekunst, McCarthy, LaFleur. Look, I'm gonna cherry pick my spot and I'm gonna win a Super Bowl. I'm gonna show you that wasn't me. This is me. Similar to sort of Brady. And I was surprised that it didn't go down that way, but I know my kids are happy. My kids are reasonably happy as Packers fans, so there's that.
I look at it, and just a quick thought here. He got everything he wanted. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I don't know who else could have given him more. He's going to get about $50 million a year. He's going to be the highest paid player in the league. He gets Devontae Adams back on the franchise tag, his buddy. He'll get Randall Cobb back. He wanted a seat at the table, quote unquote. Apparently, Gutekunst has done that. They have brought him in. What's fascinating to me, Greg, and we'll see how it all plays out. This really goes against the Packers' philosophy. Like the Packers are not usually we're going to go for broke. We're going to pay these guys all this money. They have, historically, they've somewhat changed a little bit here. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, some other moves they've made recently, but they're not really big ticket item guys. And so they're going against their team philosophy of kind of building it through the draft and letting guys go when they get too expensive and not hitting free agency hard. They're all in now. This is a year-to-year proposition. And I'm fascinated to see how the Rodgers contract is structured. Are there outs for him to leave next year, the year after? Is he going to revisit this drama every single season? I wouldn't put it past him.
Of course he is.
Let's talk about the Patriots now. Look, I read your column about what people had to say at the Combine about what the Patriots are doing. And pretty much I'll sum it up in one word, Greg, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that word would be confusion.
Yeah, bizarre. I asked a variety of people. People have been around the league. People have been with the Patriots. People, who smart people who know what they're talking about. And I asked them, can you make sense of what the Patriots are doing as far as their coaching staff and personnel staff? And they're just like, no, I can't. I don't know what they're thinking, what they're doing. I would say what surprised me the most, I would say the strongest reaction was what they're doing in the personnel department. The promotion of Matt Groh from the college side straight to director of player personnel. Not that Matt Groh isn't smart, hardworking, all that stuff. Everybody raves about Matt Groh. But it's that kind of path, just college side to director of player personnel, where you're dealing, most of the job is on the pro side. You're dealing with agents and contracts and, street free agents and stuff like that. I'm sure he dabbled in that with what he was doing before, but, now that's completely different. And, the big thing is I don't understand how Belichick thinks this is the right move. You have Steve Cargill, who was right there, who was on the pro personnel side, who came in the same year as Matt Groh to the Patriots. Belichick sort of bypassed him here. But I don't understand it from the Belichick perspective in that, you looked at what went on here personnel-wise. It worked really well when Scott Pioli was here. Sort of like, almost like a peer to Belichick, somebody who had been around, who had a lot of experience, somebody that Bill really listened to and respected. Then it went to Nick Caserio, who loved Nick, smart guy, works his ass off, but not exactly the most confrontational guy. Pretty much just Bill's caddy, all right? Hey, Bill, what do you want? What club do you want? You want a slot? You want this? Here you go. Here's the club. I have no thoughts on what you should do. It's your decision. It's that thing. So that didn't really work out that well for the Patriots, which is why they're in the roster situation they have been in for the past 2 years, actually going on many years. So Caserio leaves, and then Dave Ziegler comes in, a guy who, I know Dave a little bit and, talked to him a bit in Indy, and he comes across to me as a guy who, that he doesn't really give a crap. That I believe what I say. I don't care what the ramifications are. I'm going to tell you what I think. And that's what we talked about last year when he got promoted, who Dave Ziegler was. That's what I was hearing. And then all of a sudden the Patriots largely knock it out of the park last year in terms of personnel with the draft, a pretty good hit rate in free agency. And then also that works. You're back to sort of the Pioli guy, and Belichick decides, no, I'm going to go with the son of a friend who has no pro personnel experience, who isn't really going to stand up to me. To me, that's the thing that shocks me the most. It shocks the league the most, and I will be interested to see what impact that has on the Patriots.
From 30,000 feet, this all might make some sense a month, 2 months from now, a year from now. All I can look at is day-to-day in my feelings of what's been happening this offseason. And I'm not in love with the start for the Patriots right now. I'm really not. You lost McDaniels. The Joe Judge, Matt Patricia, Kaylee, throw it together offensive staff is going to be interesting to watch play out. The front office, as you just mentioned, is going to be interesting to watch play out. The J.C. Jackson decision, the thin secondary they're dealing with now. I'm not in love with what they've done so far. It's really early. We've got a long time before they actually play a football game. So we'll see if it all comes together when we look back and go, Belichick was a genius. But so far, I'm just left questioning a lot of what's going on right now. And, I am not super confident in this offensive staff. I'm not super confident in that secondary. And we'll see what happens here in free agency and the draft. And again, maybe from 30,000 feet a month, 2 months from now, I think all of us reserve the right to evolve our thought process as things happen because we can't predict the future. So maybe something happening right now will make a lot more sense 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now. But in the moment, in a vacuum, a lot of decisions have me just kind of scratching my head. Let's talk about
Nick, by the way, real quick. How about this? Josh McDaniels, not only did he get Mick Lombardi, but he brought over Bo Hardigree, who was the Patriots quarterbacks coach last year, helped Mac Jones. They also signed, when they announced their staff, Jerry Shaplinski, who was the quarterbacks coach before Bo Hardigree. So Josh McDaniels, who called the plays and coached the quarterbacks. So basically the equivalent is the Las Vegas Raiders have 3 Patriots quarterback coaches, and the Patriots have 0. They've gone with the approach, we don't need a quarterbacks coach. We just need Joe Judge. I just needed to say that.
Joe Judge, baby. Joe Judge or bust. Joe Judge or bust. Somebody make the T-shirts. Joe Judge or bust. All right, we got to run through this quickly, rapid fire style as we get ready for free agency. Let's first start off with Kyle Van Noy, who was released. Quick thoughts on that, Greg?
Not a surprise in terms of, his cap number. Look, a lot of these things, everyone's going to be like, oh, so they released him. What are they going to do? They need cap space. They had like $4 million. Like they need at least like 10 to get through the year. That's just to get through the year. That's before you start re-signing Devin McCourty or Matthew Slater or James White or whoever you want back on your team, let alone adding somebody. So the Patriots need cap space. They will shed other guys in terms of cap space coming up. But look, he's a nice player. He slowed down last year. I would have kept him around. This was not a, hey, take a pay cut or we'll release you. This was a straight release. So more than likely, unless he's just sitting on the street corner, Kyle Van Noy is done with the Patriots.
All right, let's roll down the free agents now for the Patriots. Again, rapid fire, 20, 30 seconds, if that, on each guy. Is he staying? Is he going? What do you think? Let's start with Devin McCourty, Greg.
I think he's staying. The question is how much you're going to have to pay him. I think you're going to have to pay him a decent amount, and I think that could be a big expenditure. I think he'll listen to other offers. He's going to be listening during the tampering period when it starts on Monday. There's a chance they could lose him, which would be another blow to that secondary. Mm-hmm. But I think if I was a betting man, I'd say he stays.
They're stuck. They need an anchor back there. I think he stays. Trent Brown.
Belichick loves them sometimes, but from what I heard at the end of last season, they were not happy with him at all. I would be surprised if he's back.
Interesting. If he comes back, I think it'll be big time incentive laden. Donta Hightower.
I think they let him test the market. They see where it is. Maybe he comes back at a reduced rate, but I think he wants to play. I keep going back, and I would say this one's 50-50 on whether he's back with the Patriots this year.
Let's not forget about Dante last time, free agency, right? That there were some medical questions, and teams were wondering if
you see on the field now.
Yep, and I think the tread's wearing, so I don't know, where he's going to go. Maybe he comes back as somebody who doesn't play as much as he has in the past. Steady Teddy, Ted Karras.
I think he's back. I think he gives you that, he covers you at guard and center. To me, is invaluable. Teddy tested the free agency water 2 years ago, went to Miami, was miserable, came back here. I think he likes this. He showed his value. I don't think he's looking for starter money, even though he started last year for the Patriots and played pretty well. I think he realizes what he is. He's smart enough. So I don't think he's going to get over his skis. But who knows? Somebody could come and pluck him and say, he's a good guy to have around. I mean, if I'm Josh McDaniels, I might come for him. If I have issues on the Raiders line.
Matthew Slater.
I think he wants to return, and I think he's back with the Patriots. That's going to be another chunk of change for, a veteran guy. I mean, I would move on, but not that I dislike Matthew Slater, but let's start his post-Patriots player character development coaching position.
James White.
He wants to come back. Karen Garrigan reported that he wants to. I think it's going to be. I think it's a ways down the road. Like, I don't think he's going to be ready for anybody to sign with his hip anytime soon. I assume there's nothing. As long as he wants to come back on a 1-year deal or whatever, there's no harm in signing him. And if it doesn't work in camp, if he doesn't have it, then you release him and he retires. I could see that happening.
Brandon Bolden.
I think he's back. Belichick loves him. Again, another vested veteran. It's gonna be a chunk of change.
We talked about Nick Folk last week. Check the pod. Jamie Collins.
Would like to return. The Patriots are wait and see. They've told people in Indy that they want to get faster in the front seven, and basically the reaction is on. The reaction to Collins was sort of like, yeah, we'll see. So he's in the wait and see, if things fall through and they need to fill a few holes, but you got to move on.
Take the speed in the front seven and inject it into my veins. Brian Hoyer.
I think he's back to help along with this whole crap show with the offensive coaches and stuff like that. He'd be like another voice for Mac. He should, just for that reason, he'd be enough to have around, and maybe you release him after camp, maybe.
All right, and then we've got three guys quickly: Bentley, Myers, and Gunner.
I think Bentley's back. I think Belichick really likes him. I don't want him back, but who knows? Maybe somebody comes in and gives him a big offer. Again, I think the Raiders are looking for linebackers. Could he update them? Myers, he's back. He probably gets a second-round tender. Gunner, no one's really talked about that. That's an interesting decision. Are you really going to was he a draft pick? I'm trying to remember right now. I think he was. I think he was like a 7th-round pick. So you could put that tag on him. I mean, the difference is Myers was undrafted, so it's either second round or first round. You don't have any other options. With Gunner, you do have the option of giving him the original round tender, which is a lot cheaper, which I assume that they do. He was undrafted. So it's the same sort of thing. That's an interesting decision. Are you really going to tag Gunner Olszewski for what you get on punt return and what he gives you on the field at a second round level at like $3.4 million. Myers is worth it. Is Gunner? I'm saying no. I put a, right of first refusal, no compensation, whatever type of tag on him.
Right.
And then I'm taking that money and I'm putting it to like Braxton Berrios to get like a real slot receiver.
Interesting. All right. The BostonSportsJournal.com member question of the day. I'm going to have my own question for you. Check them out at BSJ,
Okay.
$39.99 on the annual plan. Top-notch analysis. You know the spiel. Of course, Bedard has a ton of video analysis for the Patriots, coaches film, direct access to him in weekly chats. Here's my BostonSportsJournal.com member question of the day, Greg. Where might this team add?
Yeah, I think from my reporting at the Combine, they talk to a lot of agents and teams about receivers. Now, I don't think that they're going to go nuts or anything like that. I think that they, of course, I hear from Patriots fans every time you mention a name, they're like, "Oh, well, that's not good enough. That's not this or that." Like, whatever. I mean, yes, I reported that they asked the Panthers about
Robbie Anderson. Yep.
Yeah, who Belichick loves. He should. He's a good player. And, of course, Patriots fans hear that, and they're like, whatever, Robbie Anderson. Even though they don't look at, like, the crap that he's played with the Jets and the Panthers, that he caught 95 passes from Teddy Bridgewater, for crying out loud. I think that Robbie Anderson is an excellent player. Let me ask you this, Patriots fans who turn your nose up at Robbie Anderson. What would have been your reaction if you heard about Wes Welker back in, 2007?
Yeah.
I mean, they're different players, but Wes Welker, all I heard was about how Wes Welker, he got made by Brady and stuff like that. Even though if you looked at what Wes Welker did in Miami, I think one year, he caught a bunch of passes from Gus Frerotte. Trust me, I was down there. I covered those teams. Gus Frerotte, all this stuff. Like, he showed that he was a good player. He just needed to get on a good team with a good quarterback, and then he could go to an elite level. I look at Robbie Anderson the same way. I love Robbie Anderson. I think that they are looking. I don't want Amari Cooper at all. I think he's a dog. I think he's injured a lot. I think he quits. I don't think he's the Patriots type of guy. I could be wrong, especially if I have to pay that guy. I don't want to have anything to do with him. I think they'll probably be on sort of the second tier. I think they are looking, Allen Robinson, they'll see what his market is. I assume somebody big comes and gets him. I think that they will be in on like a Braxton Berrios on the inside. I think they're looking for sort of the secondary tier. That's on a lot of things. They're looking at the secondary tier, not the initial wave of free agency. And that includes receivers. But, like, if they get Braxton Berrios and, say, Robbie Anderson on the outside, and also one thing to clear up, because, of course, all these Twitter reporters take what you say about, what's going on with a player. What I said about Nelson Agholor, I didn't report that the Patriots would move on from Nelson Agholor. I think that they would if they got a Robbie Anderson. And it makes sense because you get cap savings if you trade Nelson Agholor. But I think they're looking at boundary receiver, slot, and they're looking to get quicker at linebacker, and they will see what's out there on the cornerback market to add. But I don't think they're going to be big money on anything. I think they spent it all last year, and they're going to be a bit conservative this year.
Until then, again, it's the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattle.